Is reality real? Or could we be living in a sophisticated simulation? Could the universe be more like a dream than we ever imagined?
Remember, you are the dreamer. You build this world.
How can science help us answer these questions? Welcome to the Simulation Hypothesis.
Have you ever had a dream, Neo, that you were so sure was real? What if you were unable to wake from that dream? How would you know the difference between the dream world and the real world?
What if you woke up one day and discovered that everything you've always taken for granted is not what it seems at all? What you thought was reality is actually a simulation, a very complex, sophisticated illusion that you live inside of. Even solid matter itself is no more real than, say, a rock that you would pick up in a dream. And not only are you living in a simulation, but it's being generated by a system that you can contact with your mind and actually change the simulation itself, in effect, hacking the universe. What would you do to change the world? Well, recent scientific discoveries are strongly suggesting that this is the case, that we live inside a simulation, and that we, as observers, have a demonstrable power over it. We are actually participating in the creation of the reality that we live in. Wait, what? Are we really living in a simulation? Well, this is the conclusion that physicists and cosmologists have been coming to. And although this idea would have been ridiculed in the recent past, it is now being taken very seriously. Cutting-edge physics experiments have been producing some very strange results. Results that say our universe isn't an objective reality, but that it's actually emerging from something else, something non-physical and beyond our senses.
This isn't real. What is real? How do you define real? If you're talking about what you can feel, what you can smell, what you can taste and see, then real is simply electrical signals interpreted by your brain. This is the world that you know. The world as it was at the end of the 20th century. It exists now only as part of a neural interactive simulation that we call the Matrix. You've been living in a dream world, Neo.
Have you ever seen The Matrix? Chances are that you have. It's a rather popular film. In one particular sequence, the protagonist Neo is presented with a conundrum. The red pill or the blue pill? A choice between learning the absolute truth behind reality and the blissful ignorance of illusion. Neo eventually decides to take the red pill and does indeed learn the truth, as horrifying as it may be. He learns that he's been living inside a simulation this whole time, and he's now finally experiencing true reality. At least, that is what you, the viewer, is led to believe, but an aspect that is somewhat dismissed is that the red pill doesn't grant you knowledge of reality as much as it completely eradicates any distinction between real and fake. Let me ask you this, when watching the movie, did you ever question if the supposed true reality that Morpheus and the gang exist within is actually true reality? What's to say that they are not inside a simulation themselves? I mean, up until this point, the Matrix was just as real as this newfound reality. If anything, the Matrix only proves that knowing what reality is and is not is an impossibility. And this could potentially go on for infinity, never reaching any sort of true, actual reality, if that even exists. Just a simulation within a simulation, within a simulation, within a simulation, within a simulation.
Now, some scientists, over the years, have postulated that this physical world only exists when it's observed. I agree. Why? Because of this. When you put a computer disk into a computer, it does not read all the information on the disk at the same time. It reads that part that it is observing, whatever that laser's hitting at the time. All the other stuff is still in information form. It's not been transferred to the screen as pictures, etc. And we do the same. When we observe, decode, then we bring it into this reality. But without that, this is just the base vibrational metaphysical universe, which is the basis of all of it.
The Matrix is a computer-generated dream world, built to keep us under control,
to keep us under control, to keep us under control,
in order to change a human being into this.
If we understand who we really are, what we really are, it's impossible to control by a bunch of control freaks. The body is the way our awareness experiences this reality. If I want to interact with this reality, which is a frequency range, I have to have an outer shell, we all do, that vibrates within this frequency range, because our consciousness is vibrating much too quickly. It's like Radio 1 trying to make connection to Radio 2. They're on different wavelengths, never going to happen. So we take on this outer projection we call a body, and therefore I can pick this up and interact with this reality.
Man is conditioned right from the beginning of his life that the world he lives in has an absolute material reality. So he grows up under the effect of this conditioning and builds his entire life on this viewpoint.
What the control system wants us to do is to believe that that projection, that vehicle to experience this reality is who we are, because then we go from, I am all that is, has been, and ever will be, I'm Charlie Smith, I'm Ethel Jones, I've got no power. The whole bottom line of it. We say I'm going on the internet. We don't go on the internet. The computer goes on the internet. And we observe the internet through the computer.
The world in scientific terms. But it was really the first time that I sort of had to confront, you know, the difference between my spiritual beliefs that we can survive, you know, our bodily death, and this deeply held belief, scientific belief of mine that it's the brain that's doing the thinking. And I realized I had a kind of epiphany where I thought it isn't the brain that's doing the thinking. So I am not entirely certain that it's just the electromagnetic interference patterns that is the brain hologram, because those obviously would perish when the brain perishes. I think there might be some subtler level, some subtler energy that we haven't discovered with our technology that's involved in this also.
So where has this pursuit taken you?
Oh my God.
Where have you landed?
Why would you ask that?
I'm asking you that here and now. It's New York City. It's
Okay.
March 7th.
Well, partly it's taken to these very strange images that are behind your head right now. These are pictures of equations. I've been, for the last 15 years, trying to answer the kinds of questions that my colleagues here have been raising. And what I've come to understand is that there are these incredible pictures that contain all the information of a set of equations that are related to string theory. And it's even more bizarre than that, because when you then try to understand these pictures, you find out that buried in them are computer codes, just like the type that you find in a browser when you go surf the web. And so I'm left with the puzzle of trying to figure out whether I live in the Matrix or not.
Wait, you're blowing my mind at this moment. So you're saying, are you saying your attempt to understand the fundamental operations of nature leads you to a set of equations that are indistinguishable from the equations that drive search engines and browsers on our computers?
That is correct. So
Wait, I have to just be silent for a minute here. So you're saying as you dig deeper, you find computer code writ in the fabric of the cosmos?
Into the equations that we want to use to describe the cosmos, yes.
Computer code.
Computer code, strings of bits of ones and zeros.
It's not just sort of resembles computer code, you're saying it is computer code.
It's not even just is computer code, it's a special kind of computer code that was invented by a scientist named Claude Shannon in the 1940s. That's what we find very, very deeply inside the equations that occur in string theory and in general in systems that we say are supersymmetric.
So are you saying we are all just, there's some entity that programmed the universe and we're just expressions of their code?
Well, I didn't say that. Some of those
like the Matrix? That's what you said.
Some of those codes are showing on the screen behind you right now. They don't look like codes, but these pictures, which we call adinkras, are graphical representations of sets of equations that are based on codes. So this is, in fact, to answer your question more directly, I have in my life come to a very strange place because I never expected that the movie The Matrix might be an accurate representation of the place in which I live.
But that, all I'm objecting to is that doesn't mean that we live in the mathematics. That means the mathematics is just descriptive of an aspect of the universe. And
well, that's a good point. Let me follow that one up. Jim, just because...
Well, first of all, I have a finger, and, you know, I look at it, and it seems to be real. And so my point of view is very conservative. Carl Sagan once said that extraordinary statements, and I'm paraphrasing.
Claims, yeah.
Right? Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Now, if the simulation hypothesis is valid, then we open the door to eternal life and resurrection and things that formerly have been discussed in the realm of religion. And the reason is really quite simple, because if you think about a computer, if we are a simulation, then we're like programs in a computer. As long as I have a computer that's not damaged, I can always rerun the program, right? So if you really believe that we are in a simulation, and there's some structure that runs that simulation, unless something damages that structure, then we are we can be repurposed. And so it starts to break down a very funny barrier between what people often think is the conflict between science and the conflict between faith.
So what you're saying...
It's the non-physical, is what he was talking about. Now, next came Nick Bostrom, and he had his PhD from this very institution, from London School of Economics. He's now at Oxford. He was at Princeton, I believe, and he's another physicist. He's a physicist and a philosopher, has degrees in both. He wrote a paper, Are You Living in a Computer Simulation? And he just went through it logically, and he found that it was impossible to say that it was impossible. Then he found out that it was unlikely to say that it was unlikely. That left him with the conclusion that certainly almost all of us are living in a simulation. He said it was very likely. I mean, now in his mind, the simulation is done from some other physical thing that's outside of what's physical, so he wouldn't say that it's non-physical, but that's where it lands. It's beyond, it's some other physical place besides ours. That's how physicists say non-physical without using that word. So that was his conclusion.
Like a Central American shaman said, we are perceivers, we are awareness, we are not objects, we have no solidity. We, or rather our reason, forget this. And thus we entrap the totality of ourselves in a vicious circle from which we rarely emerge in our lifetime. And that vicious circle is what the control system wants to keep us in. Because then we're controllable.